Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. You might hear some piano music in the background. My sister is practicing. Could have waited for later to record, but this is when I had the time and the energy. And it sounds like her timer might have gone off, so she might be stopping pretty soon. But grab whatever beverage that you wish to grab. I am in my Jane Austen mug, drinking some homemade Mexican hot chocolate. So today I have a fair amount of acquisitions. I had a birthday last week, something like that. And it added to my book stash. So first things first, let me just go through some of the acquisitions. I've been holding off showing some of these because I was hoping to get to reading them sooner rather than later. It's taken me a little longer to read than I had hoped. But yes, that is chronic fatigue for you. I wanted to find a little bit more about something I haven't seen a whole lot of people reading about, which is disabilities in history and how that was treated. I know generally how that was treated, and what made me think of this was Akhenaten in the Tutankhamun book that I have been reading, where he talked about the potential of Akhenaten's Marfan syndrome affecting how he behaved as a ruler. So that got me thinking, well, what else do we have in scholarly works and historical books about disabilities in the ancient world, medieval world, just throughout history? So I picked up this book, Disabilities and Disabled in the Roman World, A Social and Cultural History. This is by Christian Laes. I'm pretty sure it's how it's pronounced. Laes. I was somewhat limited in my choices in an already limited pool of books about disability in history, at least that I could find, because I not only wanted to find books about disability during certain periods of history, I wanted to find ones that focused on a more scholarly and objective way of talking about the subject instead of from an emotional perspective. So besides not wanting books that were more emotional versus intellectual and objective, I also was limited, or am limited, by the fact that some of the books that I wanted are textbooks that cost quite a bit of money. There were some interesting books, such as one about prosthetics I think it was in ancient Rome, and a couple of other books that really sounded interesting but were well outside my price range and weren't available on my library apps, and were expensive even on places like thrift books. So some books that I really wanted, I didn't really have the option to pick up. But this was not one of them. This was one that's piqued my interest. It says that it's disability in the Roman world. I thought that I saw something else in here that... Okay, that's the other book. So this covers topics like handicaps from birth, so like the birth defects. It covers insanity, blindness, deafness, muteness, speech defects, mobility issues. This book seems to cover a wide breadth of topics within disability. Also talks about Christianity and how that had a hand in changing some of the view of disability. So I'm interested in seeing where this goes with it. Of course, it's only going to touch very briefly on Christianity because this is talking about the Roman world in particular. So I don't think it's going to go too far down the Christianity road, at least not into the medieval Christianity. But I am looking forward to reading this. I really hope they get to it before we're finished with the first quarter of the Historathon, which is from prehistory to 500 AD. Need to find a place to put this. There we go. The next one is along the same vein. And I should preface this, people who are not familiar with my channel, besides reading history books in general and my normal, if you watch some of my other videos, I also enjoy classical books, classic fiction. I enjoy mysteries, particularly Golden Age, and sometimes fantasy, but usually the other ones are more common for me. But when I focus on history, I also have a particular interest in medical history. And not just because I happen to have medical disabilities myself, but because I used to be a nurse. So I just have a natural interest in it. So you are going to see a fair amount of that in my reading. So this is The Eye of the Beholder. And this is deformity and disability in the Greco-Roman world. Pretty sure it's pronounced Greco. Greco? No, I'm pretty sure it's Greco. So this one comes at it from a slightly different perspective. It talks about survival of the weakest. So it talks about the Roman emperors, the deformed and the divine, riding the disabled, images of the deformed. Oh, looks like they're going to cover dwarfism, which actually is very important because dwarfs were often used as entertainment and really not seen, almost seemed to be seen as subhuman during that time period. They're talking about how they did diagnosis and treatment. Okay, they're talking about racial deformity. So this is covering different ideas than the other book does, but still in the same time period. So it'll be interesting to see what each author brings to the topic. I think this is the last one along this vein. This one is medical ethics in the ancient world. So this has less to do with disability and more to do with my interest in medicine in general and its history. Now this is going to cover some touchy things that perhaps not everyone will feel comfortable with. So besides covering Hippocrates and the Hippocratic Oath, it's going to talk about abortion. It's going to talk about euthanasia. So some of these topics will not be comfortable for everybody. Probably won't be comfortable for me to read completely, but I am interested in the place of these topics in ancient history. If you keep seeing cuts, I apologize. I have a bit of a cough and I'm trying to cut out all the coughing because that's just irritating. I'm trying not to clear my throat too much because no one really wants to hear that. Just take another drink. I'm not sick or anything. It's just normal allergies for me. So then the next couple books, I'm going to show the first couple first. Actually, let's go out of the ancient world for a second. I'll show this. Ooh, I've forgotten about these. Don't move. Okay. I have forgotten about some books. Yes, I have been busy. Because I will find any excuse to get more books. I am really bad about that. Okay. This is in no particular order. Although I might grab, like I said, because I promised you guys I was done with the medical ones. Let's actually finish with the medical ones. This one came first, and I'll probably do this at the end of the first quarter. It's Infirmity in Antiquity and the Middle Ages, Social and Cultural Approaches to Health, Weakness, and Care. Now, this is the one that really... Excuse me. I am so sorry about that. This is the one that really goes into how Christianity changed changed how people view disability. Because really, from what I understand from other sources, not ones that are solely focused on disability, but kind of mentioned as a sidebar, what I, sorry about that, gone with the wind decided to fall over. And so did my math cell book. Stay. I don't know why I think that's going to work. Stay there? Okay. So, in antiquity, from what I understand, if you were disabled, you were seen as not only physically infirm, but there's something wrong with you mentally, or you were thought to be sinful, or somehow it was your fault. Like, Claudius was not really treated well because of, I can't remember what his deformity was, but he had some sort of issues that people just didn't think that he was intelligent. But this book covers how Christianity started to transform that view. You have the stigmata, how that actually was a sign of holiness. So talking about how they think saints might have had a hand in healing. I'm not sure if it's going to go into how there's a view of suffering as suffering with Christ, because that was a thing that started with Christianity. So I'm looking forward to this. This probably will sort of straddle quarter 1 and quarter 2, because it does dip into the Middle Ages as well. I'm not sure if I want to hit all of these at one time, because people are going to get kind of bored of books being shown. I might show some of these when it's closer to time period. So this one will go over here. The one thing I'm actually even more excited about, Queen Victoria's Mr. Brown. Guys, I have been wanting this book forever. It was way out of my price range, and it was just really hard to find. He's a person I'm really interested in. He really was someone who was a big support for Victoria after Albert died, and he seemed to have no other agenda. He just wanted to be her support. He had no political agenda. He was just this blunt, gruff, maybe not gruff, but he wasn't a refined man, but he cared about Victoria and was just always there for her when she needed him after Albert died. But there were plenty of people who were really uncomfortable with how close he was to Victoria, to the point that, from what I understand, some people were kind of behind her back, mockingly referring to her as Mrs. Brown. So finding this book was hard with a good price. I actually managed to get it on sale. They said it was only good quality that had some staining. Honestly, you really can't tell. There's a little bit of staining there, but that's about it. And it's well worth having this book. I'm really looking forward to it. This is not until the 4th quarter, but I really had to show it because I have always been interested in Mr. Brown and finding out more about him. And that's a picture of him. So, yes, oopsie. Oh, it has a pretty cover underneath too. Just a nice, simple, old-fashioned cover. I do look forward to reading this. I had to show it because this is one of my prized acquisitions. The last one I'm going to show right now that's not in the ancient period of time, that's not in this quarter, that I'm excited about is Bede, the Ecclesiastical History of the English People. I don't know why I haven't picked this up before. He is considered, a notable source for what we know about Saxon England, the early history of England, and I believe he covers also maybe the Norman Conquest. I really have never I've never read the book. I've only heard his work talked about in passing and about how he's a good source. So I do plan on reading this source material during lighting. There we go, the second quarter. So really excited about this. Don't know why I haven't read it before. So that'll probably be one of the first ones I start reading, other than the one that deals with disability in the ancient and medieval world. Now back to books from this quarter. So I've been waiting for this one. I know, was it? I forget who was mentioning it in the Discord, that they were reading this and they found it rather dry, which kind of just disappointed me. Was it Triumphant Reads? I'm not sure. But he was reading this and he found it dry, which is disappointing, but I still want to read it. And Hatshepsut is one of the female pharaohs. I believe some people were calling her a queen. She referred to herself as a king, I believe, because they didn't have the term queen regnant at that point, I don't believe. I know that even, I want to say Queen Elizabeth I would, while she was referring to herself, would sometimes refer to herself as a prince, just as any other male ruler would have. So they were still getting used to the idea, even that far in the future, that close to modern time, they were still trying to get their minds wrapped around the idea of what to call a female ruler, which you would have thought that would have been a long time ago, because you had queens who ruled in their own rights. Catherine of Aragon's mother, Isabella, is a perfect example. I do look forward to reading Hatshepsut. I do have another book on her, which I could possibly read as well, but I have other books I want to read, so it may or may not get read, but this one will. I'm hoping I can make my way through it in spite of other people saying that it's dry, because I really do want to learn a little bit more about her. All I've read about her has been from books that are actually focused on other things and not specifically on her. The next one is The Spartacus War by Barry Strauss. I can't remember if someone mentioned this or if it came up on Thrift Books. And Thrift Books is a bad place. Terrible, awful, really bad place. Oh, actually, this might have been Amazon. I might have seen it on Thrift Books and then went and got the lowest price I possibly could. I like the size of the text. You know, it doesn't look like I'm going to have to use a magnifying glass or anything, because sometimes it feels like you do. So I'm looking forward to this. I don't know a ton about the Spartacus Rebellion. I've actually not even seen the movie Spartacus. I just know about the general concept. So I'm looking forward to this one. It honestly looks like it could be a quick read, so I'm hoping I can just enjoy this, knock this one out. It just looks fun. Let's move the Hatshepsut. There we go. Now, the one I will probably pick up after one of the books I'm reading, after the Tutankhamun one, is this one. I have always been fascinated, ever since I first read about them in one of those. I had a big old gold-colored book on, like, everything in ancient Egypt, just like a general overview. And this is where I first learned of Akhenaten. And then, of course, I heard about him in Bob Breer, and this author's Great Courses class. And so I've always been interested in Akhenaten, and then in connection to Akhenaten, Nefertiti, his wife. So this book came up on Thrift Books for a good price. I might have even gotten this as a free one because of points. This is Egypt's Golden Couple, when Akhenaten and Nefertiti were gods on earth. So I look forward to this. I wanted to get this one in physical form versus Kindle because I wanted the pictures. I feel when you're dealing with Akhenaten, the pictures can be important because there are things about the art that people refer to. Oh, isn't it? I think Nefertiti's bust is absolutely beautiful. I wonder if she actually looked like that. If she did, she was a stunner. So, I really wanted to have something where I could physically look at the pictures. I don't always feel like on the Kindle you get the same experience with that. So I really did want this for his book. And this is written by a husband-wife Egyptology team. Apparently they have presented on the Discovery Channel, History Channel, Science Channel, and Smithsonian Channel. And appeared in National Geographic's Lost Treasures of Egypt. Okay, so that's interesting. He's an Egyptologist, and it looks like she might deal with art history, which actually works really well. She kind of looks like she belongs in the flapper period of time. If you know. I can totally imagine her the flapper. So looking forward to this one. Like I said, I've always been fascinated by them. That's actually been one of the most interesting parts of this book so far, because we really haven't gotten to the main thesis yet of Tutankhamun's death. He's starting to outline it, but most of this book has been about his family background. So about Amenhotep, I believe is Akhenaten's original name. So Amenhotep the second, Tutankhamun's grandfather. So we cover his career, and then he covers, I'm not covering anything. Bob Breer, whatever, it then covers a lot about Akhenaten and about what was the name? I was mistaken with the Amarna. Yeah, Amarna. Okay, I got it right. And Amarna, where he had his religious center, cult center. I'm not sure what you would call that. I mean, the Egyptians probably considered it a cult, where he focused on everything about the Aten, the one god that he chose to worship. What I found particularly interesting this time around, and this was highlighted by the author, where they showed a couple of poems, one written by Akhenaten, and then one written after Akhenaten had deceased and Tutankhamun took over. And these really give the feeling of Psalms. It goes through the whole prayer where you're basically saying, this God, he's so great, he can do all these amazing things. He's a helper. Everything I have comes from him. It really gives these prayers give the feeling of the Christian, or I guess Hebrew, Psalms, something you would see David or anything like that you would see written, particularly the one written by Akhenaten, where it really does sound and feel like a psalm, which is pretty cool. It shows that there is a certain writing style that it seems that was shared by different cultures during that time period. And who knows, this might have been part of the influence of the Egyptians when the Hebrews were there. So I found that to be interesting, kind of cool. Other than that, I'm not he has a lot about what Tutankhamun and his wife Nefertiti might have been doing at this time as young rulers, how they might spend their free time. I'm not sure how much of that is just conjecture. It sounds like some of it can be proven. The bows and arrows in Tutankhamun's tomb, I'm sure there was some paintings, I can't remember, I'm pretty sure he said there were some paintings that also showed him hunting the birds so you could see what he enjoyed. And Nefertiti seemed to be with him in every painting. And and apparently he never took another wife and just seemed to be really devoted to her. Now, he was pretty young when he died. From my understanding, he was only 19, so who knows what would have happened later on. But very interesting so far. A bit heartbreaking with the 2 miscarriages and the baby. mummies, even though they didn't believe that until you were named that you could go to the afterlife. It seems like the parents are hoping against hope that if they mummified them, that they would still be taken to the afterlife. What I found really interesting in this book was now they're starting to get into the discovery. So we've moved away from being actually focused on the personalities in ancient Egypt and now talking about the personalities of the people who are to find Tutankhamun's tomb. And I've just gotten to the point where they are finding it, but it is interesting learning a bit about the techniques, about the kind of personalities that would get involved with this. I had already known about the fact that Bonaparte brought a team of intellectuals who did a lot to record things, to really learn as much as they possibly could. What I am interested in, and I want to see if Bob Breyer discussed this, is I have heard that there has been a movement, and I'm not sure if this was something that I misheard, but a movement to get some of the antiquities that were taken over to other countries in Europe. There's some push to get that back to Egypt. And I want to see if he covers this because from the little bit of I know, I'm torn about it. On the one hand, that's their history and I can understand wanting it back. On the other hand, some of these things were actually sold to European collectors by Egyptians who had robbed the graves and made a living off of selling these pieces of history. So some of these pieces were legally purchased and legally belong to the purchaser and then whoever they willed it to, if they willed it to a museum or bought it from a museum. So in that way, I am a bit torn because it does legally belong to them. So I'm interested in seeing if he addresses that issue. I only know the barest facts about it, but this did show to me that some of these things were not just taken. Some of these things were purchased. And so, yeah, I want to see if he addresses that. Now, granted, that's not what this book is about, but he is going into some personalities, and I'm interested in that. Now, if I was to pick up Agatha Christie's book, where she talks about her time traveling with her husband Max, who was an archaeologist, I do believe the biography, not the autobiography, the biography that I listened to about her by Lucy Worsley, I believe it mentioned that Max ran into an issue where one of the areas he's excavating, they were then prevented from removing anything. So that's when you start seeing a crackdown. I would think anything taken during that time period would be considered theft and would have to be absolutely returned. And maybe I'll pick up that book and just learn a little bit about what it would have been like, a little bit more about what it would have been like to work on a dig during that time period. Yeah, I should pick that up. So yeah, enjoying this so far, getting interested in getting to the meat of the matter. I know I'm over halfway, well, I feel like it's over halfway through the book. Let me get past all the notes. Okay. Actually, let's go. There we go, because the appendix talks about the testable theories. So, 218 pages total for the book, and I am at 142. So, I have less than 100 pages left, and we're only now really getting to the theories about Tutankhamun's death. So, I mean, I guess on the one hand, someone might argue that, you took over half the book to get to the actual point, but I do believe that some of this background was necessary. It probably does, if you are ascribing to the theory that he was murdered, past tense is important. If you ascribe to the theory that he was murdered, then a build up to what might have led to his murder would be important. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to getting more into that. This is the farthest I've ever gotten in this book. I'm really enjoying it. He has a really readable style. What other history books? Oh, almost done with Caligula. That is an audiobook I'm listening to. It is called, if anyone's interested in it, I think it's called Caligula, the Mad Emperor. And they're discussing some of the things that could have been going on besides actual madness. Yes, it's called Caligula, the Mad Emperor of Rome, and it's by Stephen Dando Collins. And it has like an orange snake on the cover. So I am enjoying it. This is one that I mentioned in the Discord group, that there's only one issue that I've noticed, and I want to see if he repeats this issue again later on. He starts off the book saying what prompted it. And this is okay, regardless as to where you land politically. He was talking about how Caligula reminded certain people of certain political figures during a presidential election. And he referenced this as a starting point. I'm not terribly fond of bringing modern figures into a historical book, but if that's your starting point, that's your starting point. Okay, fine. Now, he does say he's going to address it in the last chapter, and I'm interested in seeing how he handles it, because that's not, when I see a book about Caligula, and that is not the thesis that I was expecting when I opened the book. So I'm hoping he doesn't go too far down the political rabbit hole, because I'm not reading Caligula for American politics. The other thing that he brought up that didn't particularly age well was the comparison of Germanicus and Agrippina the Elder to certain modern figures. So the first one he did, or the first couple he compared them to, were Jackie Kennedy and JFK. It's a little too modern a comparison for my liking, but okay, whatever, if you're trying to illustrate your point. I felt like he didn't need to use modern figures to illustrate his point. All he had to say was how popular they were, describe the effect they had. I felt like a reasonable reader, an intelligent reader, could have built a picture for himself without the need to compare to more modern celebrities, more modern icons. And then this is where he really made his mistake. He then compared the popularity of Germanicus and Agrippina the Elder to that of Harry and Meghan. I paused a second, went to look at when this book was written, and it was released in 2017. Which I believe was around the time where they were at the height of their popularity. So during that time, it would have been applicable. The problem is, he made the mistake of using two people who at the time were popular, but who were still alive. And as long as someone's still alive, there's still room for change, and sometimes quite dramatic change. So in this case, this reference didn't age well. And my personal preference for a history book is that pop culture references are kept to a minimum. Or honestly, I don't care for them at all. Because I don't feel like they come off well. I don't need to, in order to understand history, I don't need you to kind of pull me in with pop culture. It feels cheap. Or in the discussion we had at Discord, we were talking about like he's trying to be cool. And it might work for now, but it's not going to necessarily age very well for the future. Even if you're talking about the JFK Jackie comparison, yeah, people might know now and remember now what that excitement was about. But what about when people are reading your book later, if you want that book to have any sort of longevity, perhaps there's going to be a point where there are people who, well, eventually there is going to be a point where there are going to be people who don't remember, Jackie and JFK as like being there when when the assassination occurred, or when the excitement was such a big deal. When you get to that point, there are going to be people who might not eventually remember what that looked like, and they'll be like, "Who are what does this mean? Why is he bringing in this example?" They'll be able to gather from inference, but if you can gather from inference that, oh, this just means that they're terribly popular, then you didn't need the example at all. It's just, it's unnecessary. So that's just a minor quibble I have. That just leave modern stuff out of it. I'm reading history for history. Assume I'm intelligent enough to figure out, based on you showing me, show not tell. Writing maxim, show not tell. Show me how popular they were. They were met by crowds everywhere they went. And actually, he did this, so I don't know why he felt the need to add comparisons to JFK and Jackie and Harry and Meghan, because he mentioned when they came back from Germany, that there were the roads were lined leading up to Rome. They were lined with crowds who just wanted to cheer Germanicus, were chanting for Germanicus, far beyond what was necessary for his triumph. And that was the level of popularity he had. And he uses several examples just to show how popular Germanicus and Agrippina were. That this was they were the perfect couple. They were just seen as so amazing. But this was shown by the author in various different places. So he didn't need to do the other. So yeah, other than that, the book is really, I've really enjoyed it. I feel like I know Caligula better. I actually rather enjoyed how he chose to look into Caligula and try to see if there was sense sometimes in the madness. He didn't try to downplay the cruelty, but he did try to see, okay, this is what the historians of that time said, but what was the motivation behind this? What was at play? And what was at play with historians of a later time period? Were they not looking into it far enough? Was this lazy tracking of history, or was there a bias? Is it rewriting history to try to see Caligula in a different light? Sorry, I am having trouble with words. So he does cover some very interesting ideas in this. Now, after Caligula, spoiler alert, Caligula died. So after Caligula's death, he does go further into Claudius, and I believe he's going into Nero now, because he mentioned Agrippina the Younger poisoning. Actually, he does mention Nero as well. So he goes further into the period of time after Nero, where you have emperor after emperor who takes office and then dies. But yeah, he has a very enjoyable style I'm listening to books, so to listen to, and the reader is good. I just wish he had kept away from trying to be, the cool historian or whatever he was trying to do. Now I'm headed towards the last chapter, where he said that he would address the comparisons of Caligula to the particular political figure that he was compared to in a negative way. I'm hoping that he will not go too deep into this and make a political bias in this book, because that's not what I'm reading this book for, and I'm hoping he doesn't ruin what's been an enjoyable book by doing so. One way or another, I don't care which way the bias is. I just don't want it in this book. I don't mind if he mentions that, well, there's both tendency of narcissism or anything like that. I just don't want him to go too far one way or another to make it more about that person than Caligula. Sorry, I was trying to lose my voice again. So, yeah, I've been enjoying the book. After this one, I plan on listening to Domina. I have already started reading it, but rather than starting another audiobook, I found that I could get Domina for free. For whatever reason, it was free because I already had the book. So I went ahead, got that for free, and I'll listen to it so then I can finish a book that I already have going instead of starting another audiobook. So I'm hoping that way I can proceed with Domina. And I'm going to resist the urge to start another book on Kindle. I need to finish Tutankhamun. I might pick up a couple of books to read after Tutankhamun is done, because I really do want to read about Nefertiti and Akhenaten, but I also want to read one of my disability books. So stay tuned. We will see how that goes. So I hope that you're enjoying this. Oh, something I noticed, I'm interested in just posing the, I don't even know what I'm, okay, let's go ahead. I noticed while reading, and that's the point I was still reading versus listening to Domina, that there was a point where Livia, when you first see her in the history of ancient Rome during the time of her husband Augustus, that she was seen as almost being the perfect wife. She was lauded. She just was heaped with praise. And her husband really put her on a pedestal for all women to ascribe to. So you start with Livia at this point, and then by the time you reach Tiberius being emperor, she goes from being on this pedestal to being considered this evil woman who, and it starts even before Tiberius takes the emperorship. You start seeing, oh, this possible heir dies. That possible heir dies. Augustus, all these family members are dying. This must be Livia's fault. So it's really odd how quickly and how far she falls when you look at her representation in history. And I was thinking about, yes, it could be definitely something that could be ascribed to a society that did not think highly of women. But I also was thinking of how interestingly this compared to another historical figure, not much later, but Eleanor of Aquitaine had the opposite happen. When you first see her in history, her reputation is like dirt. She is just, especially, so she's just sort of looked on with suspicion. She had divorced her husband, and then, who was the king of France, and then clandestinely, married Henry in England. So that didn't really gain her any brownie points. And then her reputation got to its all-time low with the rebellion against the king, and her actually being a part of her son's rebellion, to the point where she was actually imprisoned, I believe, for the rest of her husband's life, or for most of the rest of her husband's life. And during that time period, she was just considered evil, this awful woman, basically what Livia was seen as by the time she passed. But then Eleanor of Aquitaine, her reputation began to change. And you began to see this with her raising money to get Richard free after he was taken prisoner after his time in the crusade. And then you also see it during her attempt to kind of help John not be quite so John. Kind of put a rein on King John. And by the time she passed, she was really lauded as this, this wonderful mother, this, paragon of wisdom and virtue and all this other kind of stuff. Just a huge flip of her reputation. Just like Livia's went from this amazing down to like flip, the most horrible woman, poisoning all these people and making sure that her son made it to the throne. It's really interesting how these two women had such an extreme difference in the changes that happened, the extreme changes that happened in their reputations. But I can't find a similar one for men who ruled in history. Usually, if a man ruled in history, from what I could tell, if he had a fall from popularity, like Caligula actually, where Caligula, he was very popular where he started. I believe Nero was too. Caligula was super popular when he started, Oh yeah, he's a breath of fresh air after Tiberius, this young emperor, he just wants to, grant favors, release people from prison, all this other kind of stuff. Like, he was super popular. And then, after he got sick, he flipped. And very quickly, his reputation changed. And it never got back. Now, part of that was his behavior. But I can't find an example similar to Eleanor of Aquitaine for a male ruler. Because you look at Henry VIII, similar thing, very popular, then, reputation in tatters, and, he just always stays that way. And I'm trying to think of another ruler who that changed. And maybe there's someone that I'm not thinking about, but I just can't find one. I'm not sure if this has more to do with the way that a lot of male rulers might have been, that once they committed to an action, they just sort of doubled down, because of their pride or the fear that they might not be seen as worthy of being king if they backed down. I mean, I know that's part of why you had a queen consort be an advocate, so that way the king could grant pardon without being made to look weak. So I'm wondering if part of why you didn't see a lot of flipping of reputation was because a king wouldn't want to back down because that would make him seem weak. So I don't really, I guess I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, but I'm interested if anyone can think of an example of not just someone like Livia and Caligula, who started out popular and then had their reputations ruined, but another male ruler or consort like Eleanor of Aquitaine, whose reputation was bad to start and then was amazing. Because I'm even thinking of William the Conqueror, and his just never really improved. So, yeah, I must be missing somebody, but yeah, sound out in the comments. I'm sure I'm not thinking of somebody. I don't have, the knowledge of all history ever, so there might be someone in Eastern history that I don't know about, or even just in other areas of Europe, since my focus tends to be in England and some of the antiquity and then some American history. So there could well be something I'm missing. Anyway, that's really, I guess I'm done. I'm just sort of rambling at this point. Thank you for joining me today. Hope that you enjoyed some of that. I do have links down in the description for the Historathon, for some of the people that I know are joining in with that, and just what the quarters are. So if anyone wants to read along with the quarters. I don't know if I have it down or not. I am also doing, just for my own enjoyment, if anyone wants to do it as well, I'm doing a concurrent historical fiction read along, where I will be reading the kind of books that match up with the quarters of the Historathon. So right now I'll be reading historical fiction set in ancient times. So, like, in this book here, in Agatha Christie's Murder International, I have Death Comes as the End, and that's her one historical fiction that's a murder mystery based in ancient Egypt. So I do need to make sure I get this one read. It's been a while since I've read this one anyway, so I've only read it once. I'm looking forward to rereading it. And my dad had to fix the binding on it, so now I can actually read it. Oh, by the way, cool bookmark. A friend of mine gave me this for my birthday. So, this is my Poirot bookmark, my Agatha Christie bookmark from now on. Okay, really signing off now. Thank you for joining me, and I hope that you have a blessed day. Bye. Okay, guys, I don't know where this is going in. Probably somewhere after my outro and all that stuff, but whoo, I am mad. So I just finished Caligula, and I had chosen to give it a chance in spite of the fact that the first chapter stated that its thesis and its jumping off point was comparison to a modern day American politician. That for me is usually an immediate turnoff. I don't care who the politician is. I do not like politics, modern day politics, American politics, sprinkled into my history about the ancient world, about medieval times. If I see that in a description, if I see that introduction, I tend to go, whoop, bye. This book did not have it in the description, so I bought it in good faith. I decided, well, if that's his starting off point, fine. That's cool. That was what made him start the book. The last chapter ruined the whole book for me. Book itself is interesting, although I have seen other people in reviews take some issue with the way Tiberius is talked about as a pedophile. Not even sure if I can say that here on YouTube. Well, I guess I'll be bleeped if I can't. But and I can see that argument because it doesn't seem that there's necessarily a whole lot of evidence for it, just someone saying it, and there's plenty of evidence of if a historian didn't like an emperor, of him just completely tearing him apart, particularly if it was a historian who was trying to cozy up to Caligula or someone later on. It really benefits them to make Tiberius look as bad as possible. So, Tiberius stuff I can take with a grain of salt. The last chapter, though, is really what made me mad. He went hard on into the comparison to a modern American political figure. Some of the descriptions were just weak at best. If he had just gone and said they're both narcissists, totally would have agreed. I think most politicians, most people can agree, have a level of narcissism to them. But most politicians name call, most politicians do a whole bunch of things. They've done since, you want to see some harsh behavior. Look at Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. So not unusual behavior among politicians. Does that make them Caligula? No. Do any modern American politicians say, hey, go fall on your sword and kill yourself? Or, hey, you kill yourself or I kill you because I need your money? No. And the comparison is absolutely ridiculous. It's got a huge bias to it. And I've said this about other books before. Do not tell me what to think. Tell me the information. I'll figure out what to think. I believe I'm intelligent enough. Maybe I'm wrong, but I believe I'm intelligent enough to make those connections myself, should I see that they exist. Even if I'm not intelligent enough, that should be my decision to make that jump. And nothing makes me more mad when, come on now, just think about it. Any time a politician isn't liked now, any area, they're compared to Nazis. They're going to be compared to Caligula. They're going to be compared to the worst possible thing that someone can think of, because politics is drama. So No. Just leave American politics out of this. What if I was an American? What if I, don't want to see Americans sprinkled into everything? I mean, someone in England, someone in Africa, someone in Argentina, something. They might not care. They don't want to see this just because they want to read about Caligula. Or they might be like me, who they'd like to read history because they don't necessarily want to think about modern politics. Or they want to think about it using their own brain rather than having someone else tell them how to use their brain. So, yes, that annoys the heck out of me. I bumped that thing right down to 2 stars. You want to read the bulk of the book? I did enjoy that. I thought it aged badly. Probably not the best thing to compare Germanicus and Agrippina the Elder to Harry and Meghan before Harry and Meghan had a chance to live their full lives and were given a chance to change public opinion of them one way or another. So, poor decision making at the beginning of the book only was indicative of further poor decision making later in the book. I wish that the author had put his thesis into the description of the book. This book would not have been a purchase by me. And unless you skip the end, or you don't care if someone rams something down your throat, don't read this book. Or just read everything but the last chapter. Although, like I said, I didn't notice, but that's only because I know about ancient Roman history, but I'm not as strong in as I am in other areas. So the other person who reviewed it on Storygraph mentioned that the assumptions about Tiberius, they were very much assumptions, and not a lot of evidence was presented for that. And looking back on that, I can see that argument. So this author picks and chooses which evidence to present as fact. Now, when I'm reading it, I do feel like for the most part he gives Caligula a fair shake, but this is the only book I've read full on about Caligula, and I might have to search out another one that is more focused on giving the absolute fact of giving the facts of the time period in which it is set versus feeding into whatever is going on now. I don't, try to pull me in by pulling in modern day figures or, making modern day comparisons. I read history because I like history. Stick to that. Or else let me know, and then I won't stick with you. So, yes, sorry about the really ending. That made me so mad. So, yes, I do look forward to maybe reading something else on Caligula at some point, just so that I can get another point of view, because this is the way that I choose to read history. I know that every historian has a bias. Some more obvious than others, like this particular author has a very obvious bias, especially by the end of the book. But when I choose to read history books, I like to read this history book I'm going to use Caligula as an example again. This history book on Caligula, who sees him as, okay, yes, he seemed mad, but these are some possible reasons behind his seemingly mad behavior. And then this other one who goes, oh my gosh, he's absolutely insane, and here's why I think so. And, you can go from, or even ones who are just like gradations off of each other. Because eventually, if I'm looking all the way around from different point of views, it's like different cameras. When you're when you're shooting for a movie, it gives you all different points of view. And eventually, from looking at all the different points of view, I can come to suss out from the facts that I am gathering together from using my own deductive reasoning, can figure out what the truth is. But I don't want that to be spoon-fed to me by this one author or that one author. I want to look at the various different things and go, spread out the facts and see, okay, this is the ridiculous stuff, or this is the stuff that doesn't make sense, and these are the commonalities. that's what the picture most likely was. And that is the way I think history is best handled, because even back then, I mean, Seneca had his own his own agenda he wanted to push, and so did any of the authors. I mentioned this when I was talking about Boudica last time. So yeah, it's just a shame that this was not written by someone who seemed to wish to present history in as close to an unbiased manner as possible. So, okay, I think I've calmed down a little bit. Yes, this is staying in. Will this probably push people away? Maybe, but I just get excited about what I read one way or another. So, if you stuck around, if you continue to stick around in spite of my ranting, thank you. I hope that you enjoyed at least part of this booktube, whether or not you enjoy this ending rant, and I hope that you have a blessed, night, because it is actually after midnight now. Bye.